Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the 2 Plus podcast for tactics. And today I wanted to look at redirecting using a close order unit. So, in the history of the game, redirecting has always been a concept that is important to use for battlefield advantage. We've talked about it a bit on this channel earlier. However, I think Grey Eagles, the unit I'm going to use today, are known historically as one of the units that can do this the best. And in this edition, where they are otherwise not very good at all for lots of reasons, they still hold a specific feature which makes them excellent at this task that was demonstrated in the game that I want to show below. So I've been lucky enough to play with the Seaguard Garrison since it came out, and while I don't think the list is particularly competitive at a lower points count, it's got a lot of fun features, and importantly, you can play Grey Eagles in the special points. So one of the things that's hamstrung Eagles for High Elves and I believe Wood Elves is that they're in the rare slot of those armies, which are pretty much full of things that you might want to take already in another sense, like Sisters of Avalon or Loth and Skycutters in this way. So in the Seaguard list, you can play them. And in the game below, I was playing a sort of Highlander, one-of-a-kind Seaguard list with a Merworm, a Skycutter, and you can see in the middle a Grey Eagle. So this is after my first turn, where I went first and have moved my Grey Eagle across, not sure of where Paddy, my brother, is going to move his troops. So it looks somewhat awkwardly positioned in this sense. So right now it could be it's facing the opposite flank. However, this big unit of Boar Boys, in some ways what we call like a bus or a Death Star, is formed up on the left flank and has come straight forward. So what I've done with the Eagle, you'll see in the next, is I am able to march it. And a close-up of this, because it's a flyer, it can march without having to test for enemy sighted. That's really important because the Eagle doesn't have very high leadership, and that can get it into trouble as one of the things as a war machine hunter, which is the role that it's had in previous editions. I'm not sure it's as good at anymore. It's just a little bit too vulnerable and a little bit too whiffy at taking on, say, even a cannon crew and guaranteeing a victory. So you can see here that it looks like it's not going to be able to make this Boar Boy unit. But with a march move of 20 inches and not having to test for that, you're probably wheeling this front arc about 3 inches, maybe another three, to come right round, to face around. And then you've got a fair bit that ends up, I was able to quite comfortably end up positioned this way. So what's important that I alluded to at the start is that Eagle is close order. So that in many ways is a disadvantage because it doesn't have unit strength 5, so it doesn't gain the +1 in combat. However, what it means for chaff redirection, which is very important and has been pointed out in earlier videos that I've made about skirmishers aligning to skirmishers, in this instance, the Boar Boy unit has to align to my Eagle. So what that means is when it charges, they will wheel to hit the Eagle and face this way, overrunning straight ahead after destroying the Eagle. So in this game, that little tree base is delineating the edge of the board. So I had positioned it in a way that if the Boar Boys were to follow up, they would have to run off the board. So it's very important in this format, I'm finding, where charges, especially near difficult terrain, can be very risky, incredibly so with infantry. So a lot of units have Swift Stride. When Swift Stride is in play, you are able to guarantee charges pretty much. And in this instance, with infantry, it's very risky. While rolling a 5 on a charge roll is probable, it's very easy to not roll a charge, and the penalties for a failed charge are probably devastating in many ways. So for a lot of units, it's better just to march into the charge range, and as long as you're within the wheel arc of that unit, it's not going to be able to avoid charging you. I think this is something we might bring up in a later video. So anvil units enter that and infantry are useful in the fact that they can get into an opponent's charge arc. They're charged on the turn. If they can then fall back in good order or have a reasonably survival response, then on the other turn, they're going to be able to escape from combat on their own turn and potentially even move away. So in this instance, the eagle gets charged next turn. What I'm able to do is flee deliberately, and yes, my eagle goes off the board and it's lost. However, because it's so close to the edge of the board, the boar boys will flee off the board. So if I stay there and take the hit, he could have a restrain and reform test. And then next turn, he's going to be able to come back and charge something else. That would still be 60 points to prevent one turn of the ball boys doing what they want, and they're going to be stuck in place as well, so they're not going to be made much of an advance. But on the other hand, because I was so close to the side of the board, he's going to still have to roll his charge roll and make a charge move because it's not a failed charge. The charge succeeds. That means that he has to move his full charge movement, which, and needing only one unit to go off the edge of the board for the whole unit to go off, it then gains me 2 turns for 60 points. So the first turn for the charge, the second turn when he comes back, he can't charge and he's on the board edge looking for something to do. So in this video, I hope I've shown you this is really the ideal chaff redirection situation in the game. Unfortunately, the boar boys were just too big for what I could muster with my Loth and Seaguard army. However, I think it is worth noting that the Great Eagle, while it traditionally has been good at this role, it's now very much narrowed to being ideal in the chaff redirection or blocking movement sort of role, but that War Machine Hunter role, which you've seen for some of our battle reports earlier on, is not so good. So the key thing is to be close order, to get in the charge arc, and then to have enough move to orient your base in a way that takes the opponent into a disadvantageous position. You're thinking of other units that have these features. You don't want them to be skirmish because then that will change the alignment. Anyway, I hope today was informative and thanks for watching.